Hello and welcome to the Rogue Monkey podcast and episode 36. My name is Kevin Pickard. Today we're joined by Emmy Awards winner Clint Pulver. He's a keynote speaker, author and professional drummer. He shares with us some of his amazing experiences that have culminated in his incredible book titled I Love It Here, How Great Leaders Create Organisations Their People Never Want to Leave. Before we get into today's conversation, we'd really appreciate it if once you've finished with today's show, you can give us a quick rate and review, as it helps capture your thoughts on our discussions. So, on to episode 36. Clint explores with us some of his lessons from his incredible journey that's taken him from the School of Rock as a drummer through to some immersive experiences as the famous undercover millennial. That project involved interviewing more than 10,000 employees across the USA, revealing the best methods for identifying talent, building a sense of ownership and developing a successful culture that employees will love. The wider implications of Clint's work and some of his messages means that it doesn't matter what industry you work in. If you're a leader of any kind, in a sports team, in a classroom or an office, our discussion today and Clint's book are 100% going to help you. So, let's get into it and episode 36 of the Rogue Monkey podcast. I Love It Here, the journey from surviving to thriving, a conversation with Clint Pulver. Hi Clint, how are we doing? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks Kevin, I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing some time with us. We're really excited to kind of explore your journey and the book and all these amazing experiences you've had. But let's just get started. Who are you and kind of what's your journey been so far?
Yeah, my name's Clint Pulver and I'm a professional keynote speaker and an author, a professional drummer, and spend my time working with organizations on how to create workplace cultures that people never want to leave. And I've worked as the undercover millennial for the last 5 years. And it's kind of like Undercover Boss, if you've ever seen that TV show. It's kind of like that without the makeup. And I've worked with 181 organizations, and undercover, I've interviewed over 10,000 employees as the undercover millennial. Yeah, it's been a fun journey.
There's plenty of things for us to unpick, but I'm really curious as to where this all started. And obviously I've had a sneak preview from looking at the book, but kind of for yourself, as early as you can remember, where did this kind of curiousness and kind of creativity in your approach to things start?
Yeah, so 5 years ago, I was a part of a mastermind group when we were in New York City meeting with different CEOs and business leaders. And this one gentleman that we met with, he owned a sporting goods store, and we're in his beautiful store in Manhattan. And he was talking about how he needed to change the strategy of business to meet the demands of the marketplace. And business is always adapting. It's always changing. And he was this thick, he had this deep, thick New York accent. And I'll never forget, he said, you got to adapt or you're going to die. You got to adapt or you're going to die. And it's a very profound statement. And I agreed with him. You need to adapt in business. But then I asked him a question. I said, so what about your management style? Have you changed how you how you manage people today versus what you did 20 years ago? And he fired back and he said, no. The way I manage today is the same way I managed 20 years ago, and we get results. And it was another profound statement. And I thought, man, how interesting. He felt the need to change how he did his business strategy, but when it came to people, there was no need to adapt. And so I thanked him for his time. And I remember I looked around the store, and all of his employees were my age or younger, all millennials, Gen Z people, right out of high school or college age kids. And I just thought to myself, I said, I wonder if they would say the same thing. I wonder if they would have the same perspective as this guy did. And so after we ended the discussion, we had 35 minutes until we needed to be to the next place. So I had nothing else better to do. So I walked up to the first employee that I saw and I said, hey, I'm just curious. What's it like to work here? And the employee kind of looks around. It gets all quiet. I feel like we're doing an illegal drug exchange. And he says, do you really want to know? And I said, yeah. He said, I can't stand it here. I said, yeah, man, I literally hate my job. It's just a job. I feel like I'm a cog in the wheel. He said, I don't even think my manager knows that I'm here right now. And I was like, okay, well, then why are you still working here? And he said, oh, I've already applied to 3 other places. As soon as I get a chance to leave and go somewhere else, I'm out. Another profound statement. And I thought, well, maybe the kids just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Maybe he's having a bad day. So I went and asked another employee. and another and another. And at the end of 35 minutes, I had interviewed 6 of his employees. And at the end of those conversations, 5 out of the 6 of his staff members said they would not be working for this guy and his store in less than 3.5 months. And that was a moment for me. And I realized the perspective of sometimes that we have as leaders versus the reality of what's actually happening in the lives of our employees is couldn't be more opposite. Is completely night and day different. And I remember thinking too, man, I wish the CEO could hear this. I wish he knew. And I bet he would do things differently if he knew the experiences people were having. And that was the moment I started the Undercover Millennial program. And it was neat because we created an environment where people could speak their truth. They could be honest. You know, I wasn't a survey. I'm not a manager. I'm just another millennial. And they didn't know that they were speaking their truth. So we got honesty. But it's been a beautiful thing. And we've been able to create the most real and authentic data behind how great leaders were creating organizations that people never wanted to leave. And that's why I titled the book, I Love It Here, because that was the magic of all of the research, is when I would go up to an employee and say, what's it like to work here? And they would respond with, I love it here. I love my job. I love my manager. I love what we get to do. And then when that would trend in an organization and the magic behind what those leaders were doing to yield that kind of loyalty, to bring that kind of a response from their people. And that's what the book's all about.
So that, I guess, as well, like, having read it, you can see, I guess one of the standard arguments against it would be, oh, well, we're not like every other business out there. It wouldn't work for us. Whereas actually the examples you give, they're so wide ranging and different industries they're in and things like that. And actually that almost negates that argument of saying, well, hold on, we spoke to people across the board here and we're getting the same feedback. And to be able to, I guess, make that in such a concise and like translatable way where people can read the book and go, this is 5-10 years of research that I've actually experienced, and it's so passionate the way it comes across. So what was it like actually putting pen to paper, kind of trying to condense all those experiences into a book?
It was so hard. I'll never do it again. It's honestly been one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. It's one thing to write a book. It's another thing when you research for a book. And it was a brutal process. I have many times said, I will never do it again. I'll never do this again. I'll never do this again. But now that we're done and we're about ready to publish to the world, I'm really glad that I did. Because the cool thing, it's not another leadership book written by a self-proclaimed leadership expert. There's a lot of leadership books in this world. This is a book written by 10,000 employees who knew when their leaders were getting it right. And it's never been done before. There's never been a book that's been written in this way and has been built in the manner that we built it. And I think it's unique. And it was an honor to be able to tell their stories, to capture the employee experience on what good leadership looked and felt like to them.
And there's some really profound statements in there, like looking through it. And I think something that jumps out for me is this empathy you have with people that have a moment in time, whether it's with a manager, a colleague, a friend, whatever it is, and you relate that in such a powerful story through one of your early experiences. And I'm just wondering if you can share that with our viewers and listeners out there, because it's something that I think, and we'll include the link to your story about it, because it's such a captivating 3-minute clip that actually you watch it and you're like, wow, that's incredible. And this kind of captivates that beautifully.
Yeah, I was the kid that growing up, I always had a hard time sitting still. I still have a hard time sitting still. And in class, I would just tap. I would move all the time. My right hand would go, my left hand would go. And obviously to everybody else, that's annoying, right? It's a constant disturbance. And I got called the twitcher. I got bullied and kids would call me the tapper. Even the teachers were frustrated. But one day there was an educator and his name was Mr. Jensen. And he'd been teaching for a long time. And I was in his class and I was tapping and he looked at me and he said, young man in the back. He said, you. He said, come here. And he said, I want to talk to you after class. We're going to have a conversation. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is it. Like, I'm going to get kicked out of school as a 10-year-old. And all the other kids, they all go, oh man, like Twitcher's gonna die. Like, you don't want to stay after class with the teacher. The bell rings, everybody leaves, and it's just me and Mr. Jensen. And he sits me down and he says, listen, he said, kid, you're the problem, kid. Like, everybody talks about you. I know you get bullied. I know you get teased. You're the kid that's on the list. And he said, because you tap in my class and you tap in everybody else's. He said, but I've watched you though. He said, you'll start tapping with your right hand, and then you'll take a pen, you can write with your left hand. And then you'll switch the pen, and you'll start writing with your right hand, and then you'll tap with your left hand. And he looked at me and he said, I think you're ambidextrous. I was like, no, I'm Presbyterian. He said, no. He said, no, that's not what it means. He said, can you tap your head and rub your belly? And I was like, yeah, I can do that without even thinking about it. And then he said, switch it. He's like, then can you rub your head and then tap your belly and then tap your belly? And I could do it without thinking about it. And he leaned back in his chair and he smiled and he said, I don't think you're a problem. I just think you're a drummer. Sometimes people hear that and they go, what's the difference between those two things? But he created a moment, and I believe in moments. I believe that we don't remember days, we remember moments. And when I did undercover research, that's what employees talked about. They talked about the moments that their managers created, the significant stories that that their leaders helped them to write. Because in that moment, Mr. Jensen, the old teacher, he leaned back in his desk and he opened up the top drawer and he reached inside and he took out my very first pair of drumsticks. My very first pair. And I'll never forget, he took the sticks and he handed them to me and he said, these are for you. And he said, Clint, I just want you to keep them in your hands as much as you can. And that was 22 years ago. And I can honestly sit here today and tell you that from that moment till literally today, I have tried my best to keep my promise to Mr. Jensen. And I've had the chance to tour and record all over the world as a professional drummer. I've been on America's Got Talent. I remember when I graduated high school, I had no idea what to do with my life. And I ended up going to university, went to school, and I graduated in 2012 with a bachelor's degree and zero college debt, zero. And that was all from music scholarships. And I don't tell that story or say those things to go, wow, good for you, Clint, or wow, what a list of accolades. You know, the reason I tell that story is because of one person who decided to see opportunities, not problems. And there's a lot of people right now in this world that constantly see the problems. It doesn't matter how great or wonderful it is, they will find what's wrong. They will find the issues. But then there's the people that see the opportunities. They see the possibilities. They see potential, not limitation. And it's incredible to see the story that they get to write in their own life and in the lives of other people. All because one teacher created a moment that in return helped me to see who I really was.
So we're going to unpick how I guess some of that impacts into, I guess, the business world and other things that you've come across over the years. But I do quite a lot of interviews with different sports people. And one of the things all the way through to kind of Olympic champion level, they can usually trace their journey back to a parent, a coach, a teacher, whoever it is that said something. And I think I find it startling that the world is startled that wouldn't apply in a business world. I can't get my head around why people are surprised by that. They're going, really? If you make people happier at work, they're more likely to do better in their lives. Like, how is that a huge surprise to people? But it really is. You know, people are like, it's a job. And it's like, but it could be so much more than that. And like do you think, especially some of the moments you've had when you were doing your research, did you see you as the 10-year-old through the eyes of those different people, almost craving somebody to be that Mr. Jensen to them?
Absolutely. And then companies sit there and they worry and they wonder why they lose people so quickly, why they have the constant revolving door of turnover and the retention issues. I've always told everybody, no significant loyalty will ever happen in a business without significant connection. And if your people can't grow where they are at, they will go and grow somewhere else. Long gone are the days of the pension and the days of you just have a job, be glad you have a job, put your head down and go to work. People have opportunities. They have possibilities, especially now with 2020 and 2021 and what we've seen in the world. People can live in London and work in California. People can live in Boston and work in Texas. They can live in Ireland and work in Australia. Like, long gone are the days where it's just whatever you have within the mile radius. You got a piece of paper, you graduated university, you have a job, you've got the benefits, just be glad and work the rest of your life. People are astute to the possibilities of what could be now. And if you are an employer right now, I would be really thinking hard about this, because we are coming into what I'm calling the great job churn of 2021. In Q3 and Q4, we will see a massive shift in employee retention, because 2021, it was really high. Or 2020, it was really high. Everybody hunkered down. Everybody held onto their job because it was COVID-19. It was crazy. Everyone's like, I have no idea what the future holds. So retention is great. And now that we're coming out of this, two things are going to happen. First off, employees will remember, when we get through this, they will remember how you treated them during the pandemic. And I've done research through this crisis as the undercover millennial, and I have seen some horrific things that leaders have done to people, how they treated people during the time when things get difficult, what they did, what they didn't do. But I've also seen how incredible leaders created beautiful stories amidst chaos. They created safety. They made sure that people were still seen and heard. They made sure that people were looked after. They exercised empathy. They understood that now you're a teacher at home and you got your kids and you're not at the office. And I get it. You've got to have a little bit of flexibility in your schedule. People will remember how you treated them when we get through this. And then the second option is people have had time to think, a lot of time to think. And current jobs, a lot of them look a lot different than they did in 2019. And if you are not thinking about this as an employer, I promise you are going to get slapped in the face in Q3 and Q4 when your employees start leaving your organization. Right now, they need the connection. You need to get to the part about them. Why? Because every employee is asking you the question, let me know when it gets to the part about me. And some managers hear that and they go, well, those entitled little shining stars in my life, right? Like, let me know when it gets to the part about me. And I would say it's not so much about entitlement as it is about good business. It's about everything that we're talking about, Kevin. It's about getting to the part about your people. We cannot, as managers, treat people like a fireplace. Sometimes we stand in front of a fireplace and we say, give me heat, then I'll give you the wood. Then I'll give you the fuel. Give me heat first. It just doesn't work that way. Those days are long gone, and we need to increase connection, possibilities, and the worth of our employees. Because if you don't, they will go and find that somewhere else.
So let's unpick, obviously, again, trying to condense all of those experiences you've had. What's the number one reason that people first leave a company? Let's do the negative one first. What's the number one reason people walk out the door in the first place?
Yeah, leadership. It's always management. Management is the number one reason why people stay. Management is also the number one reason why people leave. The beauty of why somebody would stay, though, was not so much because they had a great leader or they had a great manager. When people hated their jobs, they talked to me about the manager. When people loved their jobs, they talked to me about the mentor. Mentorship versus management. Mentorship is not leadership. Leadership is not mentorship. Mentorship is not management. Mentorship must be earned. It is not a title that you can give. Sometimes we give leadership positions to people, and you're the CEO now, you're the executive, you're the director, you're the administrator, you're the leader. It's not how this works. Leadership, traditional leadership, is the person that stands in the front of the ship and they lead, right? They're the visionary. Where are we going? And how are you going to help us get there? You are a leader if people follow you. The manager is the person that makes sure there's no leaks on the ship. The manager makes sure that the ship can move swiftly and get to where it needs to go as quick and as efficiently as possible. But the mentor is the person who takes care of the people on the ship. The mentor is someone who connects people to their dreams. They become an advocate, not just a developer. They are more concerned about the person's needs and interests rather than the overall company's. Now they know, though, that they've got to get to the part about that person so that they can grow an organization. They know that they need to connect. If you look at any really cool story, a great movie or a good play, you always have the hero of the story, and they're trying to go through this difficult experience. And then who appears every time in every good film? The mentor, right? Luke Skywalker had Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? Katniss Everdeen, she had Haymitch. Frodo had Gandalf. What else? Oh man, Aladdin had the genie. Simba had Mufasa, right? Every story, like Rocky, I love Rocky. Rocky had Mick. That type of an individual. Mentorship was key. You cannot become a mentor until the mentee invites you into their heart. And it was because of who those managers were and how they connected an employee to a better story yielded loyalty that lasted. It was the thing that employees talked about. I love my mentor, not my manager. Nobody said, I work here because my leader is the best at time management and they run the best meetings. Nobody ever said that. They talked about the moments that a mentor created where they became an advocate. They talked about the time when their spouse was sick and they showed up and said, hey, take the rest of the week off. Or they sent flowers, or they knew that employee really wanted to move up in the company and they did everything they could to block for them and to help them get to where they wanted to go. They were the Mr. Jensens, the people that communicated possibility. That was the most powerful thing to witness.
So knowing what you know now, and I'm not going to spoil the stories in the book for everyone out there, but you talk about one of your earliest experiences in the working world. What would you go back and say to yourself just entering the working world right now, knowing everything you now know?
I would make sure that my job would allow me to do three things. One, I call it the 3 Ps. One, it would allow me to do what I love most of the time. Am I doing something that I can play to my passions, pulls on my heartstrings? Number 2, will it provide in a way that's sufficient for me? Like, can I actually survive off of this and actually thrive? Not living paycheck to paycheck, and I'm always stressed about rent and how to make the car payment and feed the family. Like, can I actually provide? And then 3, would that job allow you to do something that contributes to your purpose? Would it allow you to do something bigger than yourself most of the time? Those 3 Ps: passion, the ability to provide, and has a sense of purpose. If you can do that as an employer, and if you can find that as an employee, I think you're setting yourself up to live, not just exist in this world. And too many people just exist in their job. So rinse and repeat, 9 to 5. I do the same thing day in and day out. I'm working for the money. I'm working for the weekends. You have a job. Congratulations. You're not living. You're just existing. That's what I would tell my younger self.
And I guess for people out there in those positions, whether it's managers, leaders, CEOs, whoever it is, people that perhaps set that tone, actually there's so many things to take away that actually now, like you say, is an opportunity to think, potentially make changes, because it's very easy to do an autopsy in 2022 and go, we should have, could have, would have, but actually we do have a window here. And I can speak from personal experience, because a few weeks ago I was that person who stepped out of my role into the unknown, but actually I'm so happy and so excited by all these different opportunities. So it's been an absolute pleasure. The book's out on April the 13th, which we're really excited to share with everybody. Having read it, it is incredible and inspiring and really insightful. Like I said, there's so many wonderful stories within it, and we'll make sure we include the links to it in the show notes. But Clint, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. And please keep in touch, and thanks for the time.
Well, what a powerful discussion that was. Thank you again, Clint, for sharing such inspiring insights. I've read Clint's book and there's some really useful concepts that jumped out at me. And as I mentioned at the start, it doesn't matter what industry you work in, there is something you can take away that will help you become a better leader and have a happier and more productive team. The link to Clint's book, I Love It Here, can be found in the show notes, and you can follow Clint across the various socials. Again, the links we've included in the show notes. As always, we'd appreciate it if you could give us a quick rate and review on whatever platform you're joining us today, and please share the show with your friends. Check out our website, theroguemonkey.org, if you want to find out more about what we're up to besides the podcast. Coming up in episode 37, we've got a complete change of direction as we delve into the world of nutrition, talking to Jazz Campbell, who supported professional footballers all the way through to international swimmers. Thank you for joining us today, and see you again soon for another episode of the Rogue Monkey Podcast.